Okay, next we're going into Asia. Remember, we're in the time period of 1450 to 1750. Some of the things we've looked at what went on in Europe. You'll remember the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Scientific Revolution, and European exploration. Then we start to look at how does it impact the rest of the world. What is the impact on the Americas? Obviously, those were huge. We talked about diseases and loss of life and how Europeans moved in and then moved to plantation economies and brought in slaves and the demographic shifts. We talked about the impact of the slave trade on Africa. We talked about Russia, what's going on in Russia, how Russia's not part of the world exploration but is expanding. We've looked at the three major empires, Muslim empires rather, of this time period. The Ottoman, the Safavid, and the Mughal. Now we're going to talk about what's going on out in Asia. So what is happening out in Asia? What is their initial reaction when Europeans show up on their doorstep? Well, first reaction is Asia's not nearly as excited, nor do the Europeans have the kind of impact here that they had in Africa or in the Americas, in North America and South America. They just don't have that kind of impact. Why? Well, first off, you've got your bullet up here. Little interest in European goods. Think of it this way, guys. The Europeans show up with wool. They have silk. Europe and cotton textiles. Europeans don't have either of those. Europeans show up with iron pots and pans. They've got bronze. They've got ceramics. They've got porcelain. They're not that impressed. Europeans show up with their religion of Christianity. A little conversion to Christianity. Why? Christianity seems to do best when it comes in contact with animistic. You remember what animistic means? That's right. Animistic means religion where there are spirits in every living thing. Okay? They do best when they come in contact with animistic, polytheistic, traditional religions. They're not quite as successful when they come in contact with Hindus, Buddhists, and in this part of the world, particularly down here around Malacca, you see where I got the cursor right now, Islam has made big moves. In fact, Indonesia, the modern-day country of Indonesia down here, is the most populous. By that I mean has the greatest number of Muslims of any country in the world. So, they're not impressed with European goods. They're not that impressed with Christianity. Or not that impressed. Maybe a better way to describe it is they're not that interested in it, converting to Christianity. And unlike the Americas, where people died off in large numbers, and Africa, where they tapped into an already existing business, the slave trade, their Asians are too numerous and too advanced for them to do much about it right now. Asians will keep them, Chinese, Japanese, will keep the Europeans confined, relatively confined, to a few ports, and they won't have the impact here that they had other places. So what are some of the problems with Asian trade for the Europeans? You only need to write down what's underlined in red. I tried to shorten it down for you a little bit. There's little interest for the European goods. The one thing the Europeans have, and you can guess, what's the one thing you think that Europeans have that does impress some of these groups? That's right, weapons. Weapons are what impress some of them, particularly the Japanese. Also, they find Muslims already firmly embedded. The Muslims are the outside traders who have already had some success in this part of the world. So those are the difficulties for the Europeans. What we got in a minute, we're going to look at, in 2 slides, we're going to look at why they're able to make some progress. So what were the 3 regions of Indian Ocean trade in this time period? We've already looked at this once in a map. It showed up on a test earlier that you've already looked at once. Let's look at it again. The West, by this I mean the Red Sea over in here, East Africa and the Ottomans and what we call Old Persia up here. These guys have glass, carpet, tapestry making. Remember, some of you talked about the Safavid Empire. Do you remember that? And does anybody remember what they were known for? Yes, remember the rugs and that kind of stuff? Remember I said people in the West will call them Persian carpets. It's really big during this time. Then in India, central India, there are many other things that come out of this part of the world. Cinnamon down here around Ceylon is what this map's calling it, or Sri Lanka as we know it today. But one of the big things that they have that everybody seems to want to get are cotton textiles. And then in the east, out here in China, we've got paper, porcelain, and silk textiles. So paper, porcelain, and silk. These are some of the big trade items. Notice down here we've got spice down here around the Spice Islands. You see where I'm moving the cursor. Those are the Spice Islands. Okay? So, if these are all the disadvantages for the Europeans in coming in and trading, what are some of their advantages? Why are they able to make some progress in here? Okay, first off, there's no central control over all of the Indian Ocean to overthrow. What do I mean by that? What I mean is there is no one nation. Now the Ottomans are big in this part of the world, but they don't dominate it, don't control the whole Indian Ocean trade like they'd like to. There's no military force protecting trade. So when the Europeans show up, it's not like there's a large navy that they have to overthrow. They simply have to conquer little, small kingdoms, relatively small, insignificant navies. And why? Exchanges up to this point have been done relatively peacefully. The people who are bringing glass and the carpets and horses and these kind of things, or ivory out of Africa, have something that they can barter with. Barter, you remember, means trade directly. Does everybody remember what barter means? To barter, it means to trade without money. You probably had that back in middle school. But to trade without money, that's what barter means. And so everybody had something that somebody else wanted. Okay? All right, we'll stop here and then we'll get into some specific nations who start to make inroads into this trade.